please rise and join me in the pledge to our flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Okay, let the record show that all board members are present and accounted for. No actions were taken in closed session. So on item C, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to communications. This is the point of the board meeting where individuals can address the board on items that are not on the agenda. If you are here present with us today, we'd encourage you to fill out a card and then just hand it to the board secretary right here, and we'll give you an opportunity to speak. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and include your name. Make sure you include your name and your address, or just your name, not your address, but your name along with your comment. And we'll go ahead and we'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and comment there. Is there anyone present who would like to address the board on an item that is not on the agenda? This way. Go over here. Okay, seeing no comments on YouTube. If you do want to go ahead and comment, please, once again, go ahead and do so, and we'll come back to your comments later in the agenda.
We have a comment on YouTube now.
Oh, we do. Okay, let's see.
It's from Charlie Maynohan.
Yes.
They want to know if any board commentary regarding recent teacher vax or test mandates, which we will be going over this evening. So you will hear more about that in just a little bit.
All righty. Any other comments? Okay, when hearing none, we will now move on to reports. And we'll start with the Robla Education Foundation. Okay, let's move on to employee associations. RTA, CSEA. All right, moving right along to superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. This is exciting for us to have an audience. We haven't had an audience in a while. People! Yay. Okay, so I will share that, of course, the school year here in the Robla School District begins on August 23rd. We are taking a small break right now after summer school ended on August 6th. And of course, during this very small window, everybody's working very hard to be ready for the arrival of students on the 23rd. So we're cleaning and moving and doing lots of things in this building adjacent here. I was able to get inside today. Definitely things are at a fever pitch to be ready for teachers to move in on the 18th. We have a number of activities that are happening as we gear up for the new school year. I want to remind the board we have our new Employee Luncheon. This is a new event, and it will take place next Tuesday on August 17th. And I know you have received an invitation. I think Shari shared that she has responses from all of you. I will share that enrollment looks promising Just for the audience's information, we have had some indications of possibly some declining enrollment that was happening pre-pandemic, and then we didn't know what to expect during the pandemic. But as of today, we're at about 1,980 students. And we do know that we've had a lot of students who've enrolled that are not yet put into the system. The secretaries are working very hard to do that. So I think there's a lot of promise and potential there that that enrollment will look good in this upcoming year. In terms of COVID, just a few details around that. We will discuss procedures tonight. We do have a new manual that we've created that will be before the board. We'll share that, and then we'll also talk about adopting that. We are working feverishly to stay updated from the county and the state as to the ever-changing landscape. In fact, we made some changes to the document today based upon some recent recommendations from the county. There is the new requirement for independent study, and we do want everybody to know that that is an option, although we do think it's something that will benefit a smaller group of our students, and we do want to have conversations with all of our families around whether or not that's the best option for their child. And it appears from Mr. Penman, we're hovering around 30 inquiries at this point to investigate whether or not that's something a particular family would like us to do with their child. We are moving forward with weekly COVID testing. That has been our plan since early summer, and we have contracted with a company to do that. It will be at no cost to students or to staff, and it will be something that is actually no cost to the district because they will be billing insurance companies in the state to pay for this weekly testing. With all of this said then, I think it's important to mention with the governor's announcement yesterday that vaccines will be required for all personnel working in schools. We do not see this as having a lot of impact on how we currently function in Robla. Our data tells us that between 85 and 90% of our employees are already vaccinated. And because we already planned to do weekly testing, that is an option that will make it very convenient for all of our employees and our students to get tested. We are excited to have that layer in place whether you're vaccinated or not. So even if you're not vaccinated, you will have the option of signing up for testing. And we have sent out that information out to all of our employees and all of our families. So we do hope that people will take advantage of that. We will be having conversations with both of our employee associations next week around this new requirement, and I'm confident that we'll all be in agreement around how we want to best approach this here in Robla. I wanted to give a quick update about New Hope Charter. We do now have a date when their buildings will be ready based upon all of the work we've been doing to make sure we're meeting all of the requirements to be ready to have those new buildings brought in at the Glenwood site. And it appears that staff will be able to move in during our fall break, which is October 8th, which means students would be able to start in their new buildings when we return from fall break. So what we have shared with parents is that our plan is to have an independent study program with the students at New Hope Charter for the first 6 weeks of school. There was a parent meeting held this week where we reviewed that plan with them. And of course, we're all a bit disappointed that that's kind of how things have to roll out, but there's really no way around all the requirements with the facility piece. And we do think that we can make this work for our families. They will be conducting some in-person activities with students. They'll be doing that after the regular school hours at Glenwood, so they'll be kind of later in the afternoon once the Glenwood students have gone home. And Mr. Pagani is working with his staff to create what those activities will be like. It has been exciting to meet the new staff from New Hope. They have been around this week in the district, and we're really happy to welcome them to the Robla family. Thanks to Mr. Penman, who created and conducted his first new teacher orientation this week, started on Monday, ended today. I think he'd probably want me to also acknowledge Kayla Jitan, who was a big support to him in that process. They had 3.5 very busy days of learning about how things work in Robla. They focused on the SOAR approach to teaching and learning with our consultants who came in to talk to us about that. They had a presentation from Mrs. Lyon around English learner services. They had a presentation from Mrs. Graham around special education, our MTSS process. A couple of our PLSTs worked with them on procedures and using their technology in the classroom. And then today they had a half a day on resilience to kind of catch them up on all of the things we talked about last year. Our next big event, and I guess this is a good time for me to acknowledge Shari Malaspine and all of her mastery with organizing big events, is our Employee Appreciation Picnic, which will take place for all employees on Friday, August 20th, so a week from tomorrow. Just to be extra safe, we're doing it outdoors, so we have rented a big tent to have lunch on that day. So we will serve lunch. Employees will also be able to tour the new building here at Robla. We think it's important for everybody to be able to see the new facility here. And this year we want to be sure that we are conveying to our employees a very strong focus on social emotional learning, not only for students, but for them. We're going to have a strong focus on self-care. And we've been plotting and planning a bit of a surprise that I won't reveal tonight to really kind of convey to our families, to our employees, that we strongly encourage them during this stressful school year with the continued issues around the pandemic and students coming back to school after a long time, that it's also important for them to find balance in their lives and to take care of themselves. And we do want that to be an ongoing conversation that we are having this year. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Reyes. Now we'll move on to board member reports. And come on. All right, go right ahead.
Nothing to report.
All right. Trustee Cardona.
Nothing to report.
Barnes.
Nothing to report except to say thank you to all the staff for working so hard to prepare for opening and make sure that our opening is safe and healthy for our kids. Thank you.
Trustee Boyd.
Yeah, I'd like to remind Trustee Cardona also,
Oh.
we helped
That's right.
pack this backpacks for getting ready to Robla last week.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I had three members of my Rotary Club helping us out too, with Lori Butler. It was fun. It was work.
It was great.
Got a lot done, but and I'm looking forward to attending this Saturday too. So that's my report.
That's right.
Okay, and I have nothing to report.
Yeah, I forgot about it, Dennis. Thank you.
Okay, my internet is moving very, very slowly. Okay, now we will move on to presentations and information, and we will start with facilities update.
Good evening. This is as close as we've been in 6 months. First off, let me state the obvious. We are finishing up the building over at Robla Elementary. I know folks are starting to get phone calls. Will the school be ready? Will the school be ready? Yes, the school will be ready. We've already moved in furniture. We've been coordinating the movement of the teachers' boxes into rooms as well. They will not be able to unpack until we turn over the building officially, but that is scheduled for on the 18th of August. So in the next few days, you will see a dramatic change. Today, we actually scraped off the temporary seal of the parking lot, so they'll be laying asphalt and striping tomorrow and Monday. We have crews working on the weekends as well, making sure we cover everything that needs to be covered. And we have a punch walk scheduled for Monday to making sure that we find all the nicks, find all the little things that need to be fixed before students show up. So a lot of progress has been made over there. I know it's not as dramatic as the previous 6 months where every week it seemed like something new was being added to the building. We're doing a lot of work on the interior at the moment and getting ready for students to come back in a couple weeks, as well as staff next week. Over at Bell Avenue, we've continued to work on the two-story classroom building, as well as the admin and library media center. Right now, they're proceeded to start with the stucco work. We continue to work on the restrooms and our existing classroom buildings as well. We have moved to the expansion of the staff parking lot and drop-off areas for parents. We anticipate the parking lot to be ready for staff later next week, and that should be in use. And we've also established a corridor for them to use in order to access the existing classroom building. We anticipate that that particular building or set of buildings will be completed at or about fall break for use. Over at Glenwood, the board approved the guaranteed maximum price for that last week. Construction activities continue at this moment. Right now, we're focusing on some improvements to some fencing and making sure that we have path of travel for all the students when they come back in about 10 days. We've been focusing on utility work and making sure that we're able to get a lot of work done before students return. Unfortunately, a lot of the utilities run through the heart of the campus. When you build a brand new school, it's nice to have. When you're trying to modify a campus, trying to tie back to the middle of campus is sometimes tough. So we've been working on that throughout this area or throughout this time. And just like with Robla, as we've been moving dirt around, we've been trying to be as cautious as possible about dirt and mitigating dust. Obviously, with the dry temperatures, it's been a little bit more of an adventure than it has been in the past, but we've been using water and some other resources in order to tamp that down. So we're trying to be mindful of our neighbors wherever possible and continuing to monitor that as we go forward. Looking ahead, the big highlight is obviously opening up the new two-story classroom building next door to us. As you may have noticed, we have completed the demolition of the existing classroom wings, and we've removed all the portable classrooms from the site. We anticipate that grading and foundation work for that will start probably in about 3 or 4 weeks. We're really focused on getting the two-story classroom building done. Every available man hour is being used to go do that. But once that is open, we will be resuming the construction activities on the rest of the campus. At Bell Avenue, once again, the modernization will be the next step over there. And we're continuing to work with the district and site staff on the transition plan. We are trying to mitigate as much student movement as possible. But the board should be aware, just as the public, that we may have to move some students around to accommodate the modernization schedule there as well. Over at Glenwood, right now we're going to keep all of our kids on that campus. As we get closer to the construction of the new kindergarten classroom building, we will evaluate any student movements that may be necessary to accommodate the modernization. But that's something we'll continue to work with the district staff and the site staff with as that comes closer to the construction date. Right now, we are looking at, I believe, mid-October to late October of actually placing the buildings for the new kindergarten classrooms on that campus. So if we really luck out, we'll be able to do it over fall break. And so that's kind of what we're trying to push towards. But if not, we'll make sure to do the delivery of the buildings in such a way that we do not disrupt or endanger any of the students at the site. So we continue to work on that as well as we go forward. At this time, happy to take any questions you may have. We have a few action items later on the agenda regarding additional change orders, but happy to take any questions at the time regarding school opening or any of the projects that are currently underway.
I have a question. A couple of meetings ago, or about a month ago or so, I don't know, time flies. Anyway, you were concerned about the price of lumber because it had kind of skyrocketed for about 10 minutes or so, and you had made some pretty good adjustments to make sure that we were staying in line. And it's come down. So has that concern kind of gone away or so? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I can't remember all the details, but I remember
Certainly.
the blip.
So, one of the things that I think is very important for the public and for the board to understand is that the mechanism that we utilize when we build these schools is called a guaranteed maximum price. And basically what it says is, based on these construction documents, based on the bids that the contractor receives from the trades, the carpenters, the plumbers, the electricians, other trades and vendors, what they do is basically aggregate all those bids, and there's this quote guaranteed maximum price. So within the four corners of this page that shows the drawings, the details, and so forth, what they do is they aggregate all of the work that they anticipate to do on that, and they put it into place. The good news is, in the case of Robla Elementary, that was a price that we had negotiated back in 2019. And then in Bell, shortly thereafter, and then obviously Glenwood, we're doing it in 2021. So we've been able to mitigate some of the costs as it relates to labor and to materials. Now, with materials, what's critical is when does the contractor or the subcontractor order said materials, right? So if it's something where you're going to need it pretty immediately, like lumber, okay, we can set aside an allotment, or we can buy an allotment of lumber. It sounds kind of weird to like buy a couple trees, but essentially that's kind of what you're doing with lumber futures. It's saying, okay, that grove over there is going to be slated for this project. Now, in the case of Robla, we're looking at a baseline of 2019 numbers. And so you're seeing in some of these change orders that we've been processing is either material increases, so like electrical. We had an instance where, the price of copper wire went up. We needed some additional wiring in our building, so the scope expanded, and that particular material also increased in cost. We're seeing a similar thing with concrete and asphalt at the moment. So, any additional scope to pavement, it's additional cubic yards of material, but it's also increased costs in terms of the actual material itself. The other thing that we're anticipating to hit sometime probably later this year or next year, and that's why we wanted to get Glenwood under contract, is at some point we're going to see an adjustment in labor. And so even though all of our projects are prevailing wage, even though we have a skilled workforce that is required to be hired under these lease-back agreements, one of the things that we have not quite seen yet is the bump in labor, and that's going to occur at some point. And so that's something we continue to look at. That's something we continue to evaluate. But at this point in time, we're trying to get as much of the stuff in terms of scope onto these construction documents now, so that we can get the materials ordered, we can get real-time costs for those things, and evaluate the value to the project going forward. So inflation is going to be around for a little bit. Wages have always been the most stubborn in terms of seeing increases. But it's one of those things where, we'll continue to evaluate as we go forward. Hopefully, we see it, material costs kind of mellow out a bit. The good news is that, yes, lumber is coming down. Bad news is that we're not going to be using much lumber between now and the end of Glenwood. So for instance, in Glenwood's case, a lot of that is panelized construction. There will be lumber that's in there, but that's already accounted for. But in terms of having to buy additional 2x4s and so forth across our projects, we've done a lot of that already. And so I think we've been able to mitigate that as much as possible. I apologize, it's a very long answer, but I think that's a pretty accurate thumbnail of the situation we find ourselves in.
I actually like the long answers because it educates me.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to acknowledge Mr. Caff being here tonight, the new principal of Robla School. And I want everyone to notice how nice and calm and relaxed he looks. I was going to say, even though I know he's not sleeping very much as he watches his school being constructed and keeps his fingers crossed about making sure everything is going to be ready for the first day of school. So I just want to acknowledge that he is holding on to hope and trusting that everybody's doing what they need to do, and to thank him for enduring. This is a good welcome to your job as a principal, having to work with that. But we're grateful, Mr. Caff.
I was going to say, it's not every new principal that we bring on golf from a brand new school to start with.
My thoughts exactly. Yeah, you get the brand new keys and everything.
Okay, we're going to move on now to Robla Resilience Project Evaluation Results.
So I'll begin this and then turn it over. Of course, please, ladies, stand up. So everyone, this is our presenters tonight are Margarita Jimenez Silva and Norma Hernandez with Sisterhood for Equity. And as the board is well aware, resilience is a project that Robla has been engaged in for many, many years. And we're very pleased tonight to have Dr. Sarah Trubridge here tonight with us as well, who has been with us for over 10 years doing this work. And as the board knows, in this past year, we stepped up big time to kind of grow the program and think about some new approaches. Sonia Lewis is also here tonight, one of our consultants in this last year. And I want to acknowledge that Dr. Trubridge had the very smart idea early on. She had actually been talking about this for years, but we finally took her up on her idea that we should be evaluating this work and really have some people who are smart and knowledgeable about how to evaluate a project like this come in and really look at, the work so that we can feel confident about what we're doing and so that we also can learn from that. And so we were very, very thrilled to be introduced to Sisterhood for Equity. And they have been, I just want to say right here from the get-go, that they have been so involved in this project to make sure that they are looking very closely, not at just the numbers, which is what they'll talk about mostly tonight, but also just in the process, and have been just really devoted to being part of this whole project in a much deeper way than I ever anticipated. So right at the outset, I want to express my gratitude for that. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say tonight.
So yes, we're here from Sisters for Equity. I am Margarita Jimenez Silva, and this is Norma Hernandez, and we're going to go through and share with you the data that we've collected over the past.
If we could have you do us a favor, because this is actually going out via YouTube as well. Yeah, speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Stay very close to it.
Okay. So just to start off, who we are and why we're here. We are representing Sisterhood for Equity Consulting. There's 4 of us that have been working on this project. I am Margarita, as I mentioned, and Norma Hernandez. And then we have 2 others, Ruth Levanos and Dulce Monica Delgadillo. We are literally sisters. We also are all in education. 3 of the 4 of us are former classroom teachers, and we're all continue to work in the education field. We hold, so a little bit of our credentials about why we know what we're doing here. We both hold, Norma and I'll focus on this, we hold master's and doctoral degrees from Harvard University. We've been trained in both qualitative and quantitative research methodologies. We've taught research methodology. Combined, we have over 60 publications that have been peer reviewed that look at methodologies. And we also have experience in the public and the private sector. So, so that's a little bit about us. So what we were asked to do was to come in and evaluate the year-long professional development that took place over the 2020-21 school year. We've been participating in as many of the RRP leadership meetings as has been possible, but always through the evaluation lens. So we have been there thinking about how do we measure the impact of what is being proposed and what is being done. We were contracted to do a number of things, including develop any surveys that we were going to be using to evaluate the project, to administer and analyze those survey results, to develop focus group protocols, and we did conduct a number of focus groups. We conducted 4 different focus groups with administrators, with the certified staff, with teachers and specialists, and with our various groups, including interviews with each of you as board members. We were contracted to then present the data, and we will be delivering a complete report and infographic in a couple of weeks here for your review as well. So the different data points is we started meeting back in last summer for the planning of it. And then in October, we administered and collected data of a pre-survey. And Norma will be going through the results in a few minutes of these surveys. In February, we conducted a pre-survey of those participating in the developmental sprint. In March, We collected a post-survey of those that were participants in the developmental sprint. In June, we did a post-survey of the general participants. In June, we also conducted all the focus groups. And then in June and July, we conducted the focus groups with our board members. We will not be sharing the board member interview data tonight. That was more for information. We will be presenting on the focus groups that we did with all the participants of the program.
So I'm the quantitative sister. The sister, so we make a good combination in that way. So this was a beast to tackle in some regard because we had these 4 different waves of data that we were collecting that involved different participants. But at the end of the day, 82% of all employees participated, which is a really, really high number. I've been doing survey work for a very long time. Our other sister has as well. If you get about 8 to 9%, you're jumping for joy. So at 82%, that's 82% of all employees, so unique employees. So we had approximately, 245 out of 299 employees. That's a really, 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 I cannot emphasize enough, high number. You never, ever see that number. In fact, if I would present this in the class, people would say, that's not a real number because we never see that number. So we had 100, we had this pre-survey that went out to all employees. We had 171 or 57% of the 299 employees that it was sent out to. The post-survey that went out to all, we had 100 of them came back, so that's 33%. Our pre-survey for the developmental sprint, which was this very, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the developmental sprint, but it was very targeted professional development activity. We had 39 out of the 60 or 65% of those who actually participated. And in the post-survey, we had 32 come back, or 53% of those who participated. And I kind of broke it up so you can see it as well in terms of the participation rate. And that's really important because initially when we first looked at the data and I said, oh, we have 171, that's not, a little bit more than half, still happy. But one of the questions that has come up in the leadership meetings is this representative of the employees here at Robla? And I can, with 100% confidence say, yes, this is. When you have 82% participation, this is representative of the employees of the data that we collected. Now, we don't have 4 waves of data for all, just because not everybody participated in all of them, but 245 different individuals. Yes, Mr. Barnes?
Ask you a quick question. About data, do you normally get better participation from large districts or small districts?
Do we get what? I'm sorry?
Better participation.
From small or large districts?
Mm-hmm.
It depends. I mean, it depends in terms of how much it's pushed by the administration, what kind of incentives there are, when it gets sent out. My other sister is director of institutional assessment at a non-credit institution. They never get into the double digits. And I can tell you at my own institutions that I've worked at, and that's community colleges as well as 4-year institutions, if you get about 12%, that's really, really high. So to be at 82%, I'm telling you, if I wrote this up, nobody would believe me that we had 82% of all employees participating.
Do you mean participated in the program or participated in the survey?
Participated in the survey.
Okay.
Participated in the survey. So what you're going to see tonight, I'm very, very confident is reflective of what all the employees, it's a very, very good sample. Okay, it's an excellent sample. And then we have the CRAs, the ambassadors, and this is their participation rate. So, and I did one in terms of as a proportion of all the CRAs. So 65% of the CRAs filled out the pre-survey, 53% filled out the post-survey, and that is a proportion of all the employees. So the CRAs, there were 60 of them total. They represent 13% of those who filled out the pre-survey, 11% of those who filled out the post-survey. But it's really the blue bar that you want to look at because not everybody had an opportunity to be in a CRA in that respect. Okay, and then I just want to break up in terms of demographics. 69% of those who filled out the survey, this is of the 245 people who filled out the survey, were females, 20% males, 11% other. And the demographics in terms of ethnic makeup, 52% white, 17% Latinx, 6% African American. so forth and so on. So it's reflective of what you have in, and again, at 82%, that's what I would expect. Here's the age demographics. And so 75% between the ages of 35 and 64. So again, reflective of what you have here. I would have been really surprised if that wasn't necessarily the case. And here's a different employee group. So who filled out the survey by employee group? And you notice this 21% in red, 21% or 1 out of 5 people approximately preferred not to answer what group they were in. And I'm going to speak to that in just a second because I think it leads to what type of work is still needed in the district, or at least what we found. But again, reflective of the numbers within the school district. So overall, we had very positive responses to the survey. And this was a very in-depth survey. It took approximately 20 to 25 minutes to fill it out. And again, the participation rate when we get 9 or 10% is usually a survey less than 5 minutes. So that tells me that people here at Robla are very interested in having their voices heard on the survey. Because it's very, and really, you know, we were getting anywhere close to 20%, I was going to be happy. But at 82%, I'm jumping for joy. I even have to consider throwing a party. Okay, so overall positive responses, 72% of participants agreed or strongly agreed that the project goal for the first year was achieved. 68% believe that the goal was achieved devoid of shame. And again, this is 66% agreed or strongly agreed that the goal was achieved devoid of blame. 75% agreed or strongly agreed that they are proud of the work achieved this year. This was on a Likert scale where they got the question and then they said, to what extent do you agree or disagree? And you could choose several responses from that. 80% said that the RRP project was a useful activity. 84% that believed that the project constructed a shared language. 75% agreed or strongly agreed that Robla provides a safe environment. And 90% agreed or strongly agreed the amount of time spent on the Robla Resilience Project was appropriate in terms of the time that they took out of their schedule.
Are we going to get this presentation?
I'm sorry?
Are we going to get this presentation? Because it's not uploaded, and I want to make
Yes,
that.
yeah, we can do that, absolutely.
I'm taking pictures.
We did this survey that Margarita and I have been doing for quite some time, and when we conduct these types of evaluations in terms of, did we see significant increases in participants' knowledge about several terms, and these are, you get some examples of the terms that are up here: anti-blackness, implicit bias, discrimination, student equity. There were several of those terms, and they could choose from 0 to 5. I have no knowledge of this content, or I have a substantial amount of knowledge about this concept. And what we see over time is increases when there's professional development. Sometimes we see no increases. Sometimes we see increases in terms of their knowledge increasing. And we know that if you have a base knowledge, just like anything that you learn, if you have a base knowledge, then you can begin to grow and learn from there. And so both of these had significant increases, and I've separated out for all employees on the left-hand side, and then for just the ambassadors when they went through the developmental sprint. And again, this very targeted type of professional development that they went through. On the left, the blue is the pre-survey, and the orange is the post-survey. So they had significant increases. And what that means, and I know, you know, in the last 6 months, we've heard, you know, a lot of talk about research and, you know, can we believe statistics or not? I teach statistics. I've been doing that for many, many years. And what it means when something is significant is that we're very, very confident that if you did this professional development, we would see this increase in knowledge. That means that we're pretty confident that that would happen, that this did not happen by chance. This happened because of the project. Mr. Boyd.
Yeah, but previously you showed there was quite a greater response to the pre-survey as the post-survey. So does this reflect the increase, a smaller response?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
because
is
it's
that
only.
is that still a legitimate measure then?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's the increases from the pre to the post. Okay, so how many people filled out the post and the pre? We had 171 who filled out the pre, 100 who filled out the post. If you didn't fill out the post, then it wasn't included. However, these numbers are still significant. So what happens when you reduce the sample size? It's harder to find significance. But when you do, that means you're just as confident. How significant is in this? This increase would have happened by chance 1 in 10,000 times. So 1 in 10,000. So I'm extremely confident that what we found means that it's a reflection, a positive reflection of the project. Yes, Mr. Deleuze?
Actually, it's more a positive reflection of, because we didn't actually test their knowledge of it. We asked them if they felt like they learned more or if they felt like they had a greater knowledge. So it's more a test of how they feel, how much more knowledge they feel they have of the subject matter, correct?
Yes. Well, this is all self-reported,
Right.
right? It's self-reported data. So you got a question and said, rate yourself on this, for example, implicit bias. I have no knowledge of this concept to I have a substantial amount of knowledge about this concept. So we saw an increase in them saying, oh, I know more. I know what this term means, perhaps, right? I understand what it means, where perhaps maybe I heard it, but I didn't quite understand what that meant. Okay, so, and we have two other parts of this. We have knowledge, and we have usefulness, and we have their confidence in using it. So you'll see the breakup out of both. Yes, Mr. Barnes?
Okay, so before you go to that, can you tell me, and I'm trying to look at this from, I don't know, understanding a statistics or data standpoint. Can you tell me what the significance is of an increase from 2.82 to 3.56 and an increase from 3 to 3.58? I mean, what exactly does that mean? I mean, you know.
Okay, so they're moving from, I have some knowledge of this concept to closer to, I have more than average knowledge of this concept. So maybe I have some idea what that is. I think have a little bit more than what I began with, which is what we're hoping, because that means that all the professional development that happened this year through this project wasn't a waste of time, right? We took them from one point to a deeper understanding of it.
Okay, so these are notable increases.
Yes, these are significant increases.
Okay, that's what I'm looking.
Would it be fair to say that this is basically just self-reported confidence in understanding a topic? Putting it that way.
Self-reported.
Confidence in knowledge of the topic.
Well, we have a confidence question.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we have a confidence question.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think it would be fair to say that yes, it's their understanding of it. You know, we didn't give him an exam to say,
Yeah.
you know, can you define this for us or anything like that, but it's their self-reported knowledge of it.
Okay.
The second kind of topic that we tackled was their confidence. So we get to the confidence in this. And so what we saw was that there was no significant difference in the confidence for everyone. So this difference that we see here for everyone between the pre and the post, even though it increased, I can't tell you today there was a big enough increase for me to be confident enough to say, okay, we saw significant increase in their confidence. However, we did see a significant increase for the ambassadors who went through the developmental sprint.
Okay, when you say confidence, what do you mean? Confidence in their knowledge, or you're just, all I see is confidence. You say an increase in confidence in.
Yes. So here's on the scale from 0 to 5. So they can either choose, I have no confidence in my ability to use or navigate this concept. 2, I have significant confidence in my ability to use or navigate
the concept. Okay,
And
got it.
2 and 3, just, if you can't read it, I have some confidence in my ability, I have average confidence, I have more than average confidence. Okay, so here's we have knowledge, right, how much you know about this, and then how much confidence you have in being able to use this concept in a way or navigate this concept. So I get this question is really about, can you explain it to someone? Right? Can you teach it? Can you implement in your classrooms or not? What does that look like? And what we saw was no significant difference for everyone on average, even though we see an increase here, it's approaching significance. So we saw maybe a larger gap, it would be significant. It's just not there yet. We're getting there, I would say. But for the ambassadors, even though it was a much smaller group, their difference is larger. And so now I can say it's significant. So the developmental sprint had an effect on the ambassadors in a way that it didn't because they didn't participate for the entire group.
Can you explain what ambassadors is for people who are watching this on YouTube or?
Yes, so there were 60 individuals who were, I think they were chosen. They were chosen to lead smaller groups. So they had kind of double the training, I would say, because they were exposed to the content twice. So greater amount of exposure in that regard, which means that when you're exposed to something twice as much, you have more time to reflect on it. And maybe that could be the explanation why we see the greater confidence, because they had greater exposure. And they also participated in the developmental sprint. So even more exposure to these concepts and in a way to be able to reflect on them in the way that the rest of the employees were not able to do. And so I think it's, you know, like playing a musical instrument or playing a sport. The more you do it, the more confidence you get in that you're able to explain it to somebody else or use it. And then we had this concept of usefulness. And so again, from I do not view this concept as useful or relevant in my work, to I have average confidence in my ability to use or implement this concept, to I view this concept or strategy as highly useful and or relevant in my work. And by the way, all the terms, and there were some additional ones, were presented where they ranked each, or they rated each one. And then it was an average score. And so what we saw for all the employees, we saw no significant difference. We see a 0.02 difference, so really we didn't see a difference for all employees. And for the ambassadors, we saw an increase, but the increase is not large enough for us to say it's significant. I'm not confident enough to say significant, but it's trending in the right direction. Mr. DeLuz?
Yeah, I'm just curious why on 0 through 2, you focused on whether or not it was useful. And then on 3 through 4, you changed the question to their confidence and their ability to use. Why didn't you stick with the same terminology in terms of its usefulness?
I think this is the ranking scale that we've been using, and it's been validated. And so this is not a survey necessarily that we constructed. So we're using a survey that has been validated in the past, particularly for use with classroom teachers and in school, K through 12 school settings. So if we change the wording of it, then that means we have to validate it again.
Right, but I don't understand. It seems like you're asking a different measurement from 3, 4, 5. You're asking a different question than you are for 0, 1, or 2.
Oh, instead of saying, I view this.
Yeah, how useful it is, and later you're asking about their confidence in using it.
Yeah, I get what he's saying. I'm wondering if there would be if there's a difference between if you measure them 1, 2, and 3, 0, 1, and 2 separately than 3, 4, and 5, what the scores would be.
To measure them differently?
Well, just separately.
Yeah, well, they're not different questions. They're just kind of rating. And my point is the responses, though, just 3, 4, and 5 just didn't seem to match to me with 0, 1, and 2. Yeah.
Measure them separately.
I think
what that information would be.
I think that since it doesn't apply to every employee, that the first 3 are kind of set up to where they can't really give it a higher rank since they aren't using these skills that they're learning in the workplace as openly, because their job doesn't require what we were learning and resilience, if that makes sense.
I'm not quite sure I see your difference in those categories. The wording may be not exactly the same, but I see it. To me, it is all addressing the usefulness. I'm not quite sure that I understand the difference you're trying to get at.
Well, because once again, the first one's asked about the usefulness, right? And then you get to the confidence of their ability to use it. Well, that doesn't determine whether or not you believe it's useful. It's more about, do you have confidence in your ability to use it?
But
I
knowing
don't
that,
agree with that. I feel the confidence to use it.
Well,
but knowing a baseline, like the first set is basically saying like, I don't really understand it or know how to implement it. But as you get further along progressing, it's showing your strength and ability to use it in what is.
I'll give you an example. I may not know, I can say, what is the usefulness of geometry in my everyday life? right? But then I have to say, well, what is my confidence in my ability to utilize geometry? And there's a difference between the two. I can perhaps utilize geometry or do geometry, but that doesn't necessarily speak to whether or not I feel it's useful in my daily life. You know, I'm sorry. I'm just getting off on a side. I'm just trying to understand the question, Rankin. That's honestly, I'm not. Yeah.
I can tell you with confidence that we've used this instrument before.
Uh-huh.
We've utilized it in different settings, and the reason we use it is because it's been validated. And what that means is that it's been tested out with different groups of individuals to see, do you understand the difference between this rating scale or not? Does it make sense to you? Does that mean that if you do a 4 and doing exactly what you've said, Mr. DeLuce, is to be asking that question about, well, does it mean the usefulness here, or is it about my confidence, or what does it mean? And so we're not using an instrument necessarily that we developed, nor that we validated, but that other people have. And so this is a pretty common tool that's used in terms of teacher development and professional
I
development.
hear you, and the problem is that, I mean, I guess, and I hear what you're saying, and I understand why you used it. It's just for me, in terms of my understanding of the data, you know, it's like saying, well, you know, if everybody cuts both ends of the ham off before they put it in the oven, well, that's all I need to know. Everyone does it. I may not know why people do it, and some people do it because their oven or their pan is small. I don't know, but it helps me to kind of understand the data that I was looking at, and I was just.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't want to create a big thing out of it. I'm just trying to understand. That's all.
I
think
think
I-
I understand a little bit
Yeah, I
more
understand what
what
he's
saying.
you're trying to say, but if I may finish, as far as the usefulness, I think we see that this is an area that is not quite up to where we would hope our standards would be,
Right.
no matter how it's put.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and because of that, I would love to see the difference between the first 3 questions and the secondary questions separated, so we could get more. So that's one thing. I think that might be what Craig is saying as well. I would just want to see those separated so we can see those measurements. So.
Okay, and we can investigate that. And again, this is an aggregate, an average for individuals. This is one question, one variable of a very, very long survey. So we have some open-ended questions that also kind of, I think, speak to how individuals thought about the usefulness and what they can do with that information.
Okay.
So I want to let you know that. We did have some individuals who were dissatisfied, and I think that's par for the course. That you see everywhere. I haven't evaluated a single project where we had 100% agreement in what anybody is doing. In fact, I've never met a family where you have 100% agreement in anything that you do. So we had 5 people who were who I would say were dissatisfied in that regard. Their average, here are the number of years that they're working: 7, 17, 23, 24. I didn't really see a pattern. 3 classroom teachers, 2 preferred not to answer. The employee group, 3 females, 2 males, 2 had an AA degree or self-reported, 1 with a BA, 2 preferred not to answer, all identified as being white. And they represent approximately 1.7% to 2% of all employees in the district. 1.7% to 2%. So are there some people who didn't agree with the project? Absolutely. Are there some people who were dissatisfied? Absolutely. But 98% did not fall into that category
Of those who return the surveys.
of those who returned the survey. But
Okay.
even if, worst case scenario, right? If let's say that those 5 represented of the 245, so that's at 2%. So at worst, it's 2%.
Or the 5 plus all those who decided not to turn in the post survey. That's actually the worst case scenario.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and which tells me something, and I've been doing this work, like I said, for quite some time, and I know that when people engage and if they return the survey, even if it's negative, at least they're still engaging. If you don't return the survey, you're not engaging, right? For a variety of reasons, but 1.7% to 2% of those who responded.
And because so many did return the survey, you have a lot of confidence in this.
Yes, yes. Yeah, very, very high confidence. And also because of those who return the survey are reflective of the employees that you have here. So let's say we would have had no males turn in the survey and it was only females. Well, that's problematic, right? Because you don't have the male representation in here.
Okay, so I'll go through some of the qualitative data. So this is based on the focus groups. And then at the very end, we're going to close with some of the comments of the open-ended questions that were part of the survey to kind of talk about next steps. So overall, of the focus groups, the majority were very positive about the experience, but they all had recommendations for refinement. So they said it was worthwhile. We think it moved the district forward, but we have some recommendations. The administration, the people that were part of the administrative group were the least positive of the group, and the CRAs were the most positive in terms of their experiences with it. One of the issues that came up was the issue of being authentic. The idea of, are people presenting in the group what their true feelings are they sharing what they really are experiencing? And so I think that's something that we need to explore a little further in terms of making sure that we have a safe space where people feel comfortable being their authentic selves. There's also some conversation, again, these are overall themes, and I'll break these down in a couple of slides. The need for differentiation, so we're all starting at different points. There's quite a few that have had other professional development or have undergrad degrees or master's degrees in areas where they've talked about these types of issues before. And then we have some that are hearing these kinds of ideas for the first time as part of this training. One other consensus was the need to take deeper dives into the conversations that we were having. So although they were overall happy with the structure of it, that they talk about, again, opportunities to be able to engage in deeper conversations that weren't stopped when the hour was up. So I'm going to go through now some of the responses by the kinds of questions that we asked the group. So one of the questions that we asked was the program successful in engaging in fruitful and anti-racist conversations devoid of shame and blame? And again, overall, one of the big things that came up in the qualitative data was recognition of how hard this work is. That this is not something that at the end of 1 year, you're going to have it all figured out. These are deeper conversations, deeper issues that need to be addressed. They did talk about the small groups providing a safe space, allowing everyone to have a voice. There were comments about the CRAs and the respect for the CRAs and navigating that space and be able to facilitate those conversations. In terms of recommendations, they asked for more time, again, in part to delve deeper into the topics. One of the quotes that I pulled out that I thought was very telling said, we were just getting started in the conversation, and then it's like putting the brakes on a car at 50 miles an hour because time was up. And one of the things that we want to definitely explore as we move in is this issue of the appropriate amount of shame and blame. There were some comments about, well, we need to have deeper conversations, and sometimes that leads to a little bit of shame and feeling like it being uncomfortable. So this idea of being uncomfortable in these conversations and what is the role and the appropriateness of when you are okay, when it's okay to be uncomfortable because you're untangling the knots of these very complicated issues. We asked about shared language because that was one of the goals, and the survey results indicated that yes, we have come up with some shared language. They talked about conversations that they've been having that you've been having in the districts about individuals with disabilities and how far you've come in using those terms. And that we're very much at the starting point about how you have conversations around the kinds of topics that were addressed through this training. So the recommendations was to have patience with each other. You've been talking about special education. Here's the quote. We have been working around the language about special education for 6 years. It's taken that long to have a shared language. So again, we have to be patient in developing a shared language about the ideas that we're discussing here. They asked for taking more time to have explicit definitions and examples of some of the terms that were being used, revisiting those definitions so we're sure that we're all referring to the same definitions when we're using these terms, and then perhaps a website or someplace where they can store materials and read more on their own. They talked about more intentionality when we're using specific terms, and then being able to meet people where they are in terms of background knowledge, again, because people are coming at this from very different levels of experience and exposure to the language. We asked about how they felt in regard to the growth in their own understanding of anti-racism. And we had quite a few compelling stories, and we'll share longer quotes in the full report about perception shifters and individuals who were commenting on how they didn't get the Black Lives Matter movement, or what was the big deal with George Floyd, just not understanding it. And now, because of the conversations that they had through this professional development, is understanding the larger picture, understanding the historical background about where we are now. A few people commented on understanding microaggressions now and how they had kind of dismissed them in the past. And now hearing firsthand stories about how it's impacted individuals, taking them a lot more seriously and being a lot more conscious about how language is chosen and what language is used. They felt more comfortable speaking up in advocacy for their colleagues, but also their students and the families that they work with. And they felt an urgency about these conversations that, we've waited long enough to have them. We need to start having them now. Some of the recommendations were that some of the examples, and this had to do with examples provided by some of their peers, were very superficial. And again, I think this talks to the idea of everyone's at a different point. Some of the examples that were shared were about, being conscious of different skin tone, hair type, and again, that's where the conversation ended, and wishing that you'd had more time to go deeper. And there were a few comments about the appropriateness about having these conversations with kids or with families. And the comment was, why are you going to bring up problems when there aren't any problems to be had? And so again, that's something that, how are we going to address that? Where do we move with that? With those kinds of comments and thinking. The effectiveness of the structure and how it was laid out. They like the small groups. They like the exposure to the new ideas, the terms, the history. They love the opportunity to talk to colleagues across sites, across different kinds of categories. The recommendations, however, was that they wanted a little bit less lecture. They wanted more organization, intentionality when they broke up into small groups, some transparency around some of the professional development sessions. They compared it to other resiliency trainings and how different this was. And then a rethinking of affinity groups. So there were a couple of sessions where we broke up in affinity groups, and they wanted more say about what those affinity groups might be. An example of that is we had somebody who joined one of the women affinity groups, and talked about how the conversation turned to balancing work and motherhood. And she was not a mother, and so she didn't feel like she was part of that conversation, because even though she's a woman, she didn't fall into these other categories. So being a little more specific about what those affinity groups were. We talked about impact on relationships with your colleagues, and relationships with the families that you're working with the students you're working with. Again, mostly positive, lots of specific examples about fruitful conversations that have been had. Recommendations is that it didn't impact all relationships because of the timing of the sessions. There were certain staff that could not participate. I haven't verified that, but that is one of the comments that came up. Addressing echo chambers and how at times people were choosing to have conversations with only those that agreed with their perceptions and their beliefs, and not stretching outside of those echo chambers. They wanted us to be cognizant of the issue of hierarchy and power dynamics. When you have a principal with a teacher, how does that change the conversation in the group? And then they really asked for modeling of anti-racist conversations. How do you have that conversation with a colleague who may not be agreeing with you? So planning for tier 2, this is the last question that we asked. Moving forward, the successes, lots of comments about this is the right step. We're ready to move on. However, recommendations included circling back to individuals who may have gone lost in the process or who have chosen not to engage. Talking again about this hierarchy, the differences between administrators and classified staff, addressing the issue of time. Is there an opportunity for those that want to have deeper conversations to engage in those? And then how do you differentiate for different age groups and stakeholders? So how do you then model these conversations for third graders versus sixth graders, or parents versus community members? We asked about the anti-racist pledge that was part of the work that was done. And there were comments about the process and a few comments about the common vocabulary. But overall, we didn't hear a lot of concern about the pledge itself. It was more about the process that we were going to use to get to an agreed upon pledge. So these comments here are from the open-ended survey responses. We asked what makes you hopeful, and we wanted to close with this because we think this is important, what gives us hope moving forward. They talked about recent events shout to us the need to discuss issues of race openly, safely, and kindly, or else feelings are unheard and resentments build to a breaking point and often end in violence or animosity. So again, the urgency of these conversations. Many of my colleagues are in alignment with the goal to move forward, becoming an anti-racist space. I'm only mostly hopeful because of how many of my colleagues believe racism is not a problem in our district or the country, which I find problematic. I'm proud of Robla for opening up a safe and educational platform to discuss the major issues that are impacting our families and marginalized populations of our communities and country. But overall, the people who participated in both the survey open-ended questions and the focus groups felt like we're ready to move forward, felt like there is hope in the direction that the district is going in. A couple other just quick examples from the open-ended conversations with various colleagues about race that hadn't happened in the past. And then a couple of comments were about the second point about feeling more comfortable having these conversations and being open-minded about the conversations that were being had as the work went forward. So this was not everyone's on board from day one. For some of them, it was a process that took place across the year. So do you want to finish with what's next, Norms?
So those last two slides were part not of the focus groups, but of the surveys. Again, 82% participation. So what's next? And this is what we heard in the post survey. I would love to have some classroom strategies to implement this learning in my classroom. And I think that gets back to this KCU, the knowledge, confidence, and usefulness. That gets back to why we saw those low numbers in terms of the usefulness. And if you think about your own process as a learner, if you've learned something new, you may have been exposed to it. Maybe you learned a little bit more. Maybe you gained a little bit more confidence. But can you really go out and teach it? Or, what can you do with this knowledge? All of that takes time. That is part of the learning curve that happens in any situation. I love that everyone was involved in this project. I think that some of it should be also done. I'm hoping for usable language and lesson suggestions on how all of us can start conversations with students in our classrooms. Thank you. This is going to change our school in a positive way. It is time. Margarita and I have been doing this work and with our sisters for a long time. And I can tell you that this is not an easy process. This is something that takes time. And I applaud you as a board for being on board with this, because it's not often that we find school districts that are on board, that are willing to take this leap forward. And I think you're really becoming a model for others as well. I'm happy to entertain other questions that you may have, or if you have any questions about the data or how it was collected. We have our emails there. You're more than welcome to come and contact us. And I think a big part is, as Ruben said, Superintendent Reyes said, the evaluation part. I work with a lot of people around the country who do this work, who do the professional development. And when I ask them, well, did it make a difference? I don't know. I think so. That's a really important piece, because you invest time and money, and you really want to know that you're moving in the direction that you should be, and not simply you're getting the opinion of one or two or three individuals who really felt really positive about it, or who felt really negative about it, because it's not reflective of really the entire group. So I think it's a really important piece. Mr. Boyd.
Yeah, I appreciate it all, and especially the feedback. It does say a lot. But I'm just thinking, ultimately, we want to create an atmosphere that addresses all our students equally, gives them equal opportunity. Have you ever thought about surveying the different classes of students on how they feel you're being treated within the school system? Because that's what our target is, and I say that because I can think, and I think we all see that, you kind of unintentionally, the white privilege, you kind of ignore some children that not realizing you're doing it. So we say that, but Have we ever listened to the kids' opinion on that?
It's a really good question, and part of the work that we do as academics that I've done personally, as well as looking at students' experiences. It gets a little tricky with kids that are under 18 because you need to have the parents' permission. And as a former classroom teacher, I can tell you that when I have someone observing me in the classroom, the dynamics change. It's different. It's not the natural environment that you would want. And sometimes, having been a teacher myself, and still, I mean, I'm a professor right now, is that I know that sometimes you get some disgruntled students who, I have a 10-year-old. You know, we just had an incident yesterday with him where his perception of what happened was very different than what actually happened. And that's where it gets very, I think it, it can get a little sticky. But, people have done that type of work. Obviously, it's difficult to do, but not impossible.
And I guess part of the reason I ask is I personally don't have a problem, I think as my peers can attest, of asking opinions and getting involved in discussions. But I'm not a teacher. I don't even have a college education, but I don't know how to approach a young child, ask them. But I've worked with them in the classroom and reading stuff, and I can see those things, but I wouldn't know how to approach the child.
There's lots of climate surveys that are out there that have been used for that very purpose, to say, okay, what is the climate at an individual campus, that are geared for kids. There's also tons of, I teach a class it's a master's level class where they do a project with kids, often asking them questions about how included you feel in your school. And I mean, the kids are really smart. I mean, they pick up on things.
Absolutely.
They'll talk about what happens on the playground that teachers aren't even aware or things that are going on, or what happens between the time they get dropped off on the bus and they go in the classroom. So I think there's potential in there, and it might be interesting to collect some baseline data to see, in terms of the kids, are they going to see a shift, especially if you decide to go into tier 2 of it, and you're really looking at curriculum and how it's going to be implemented, to see, do we see a shift in how comfortable the kids feel and how accepted they feel within the school district.
We do, I'll just add that we do a climate survey in Robla. Mrs. Lyon, you're back there. How often do we do healthy kids?
I didn't see you back there.
She's hiding behind the mask.
Okay. So healthy kids survey, and we are looking at other surveys as well. But, that is a climate survey that we have been doing.
Would like to thank you for putting in all the work and for all the staff at Robla who participated in all of this. I really appreciate it. I was not a part of the school board when this resilience program was started, or even the beginning of last year when this program was reviewed. The few resilience programs that I did attend, it was wonderful seeing the openness and the conversation flowing from everybody. And I truly believe that is the only way for us to move forward. And I really appreciate all the work that everybody on the board and the school district and the instructors for resilience and you have done. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
And I don't have a question more, it's more of a comment. First, I want to say thank you for this presentation, because it does give us information about whether our programs are working. And you made the comment about us doing this, and it shows a lot about us. But to us, we have to do this. If you look at our demographics of our children, there's no way we can't do this. So we have to do this. So thank you to Ruben and everyone who put this together, because this is very valuable. And I mean, if you look at the political climate, you can tell that this is very necessary. And this predates that political climate and everything that has come up recently. So this tells you that we were right on topic for wanting to address this. So yes, we absolutely have to. And there was a question in there that said, why bring this up when it's not a problem or so, and why bring this up to our kids? And that, to me, I mean, we have to bring this up because our kids learn from us even when they're not learning from us, or not officially learning from us, when it's not part of the curriculum. And that is really important. And I'll give you a really brief example. I still remember my biology teacher, Mr. Medifin. So if he ever sees this video, he can say that I talked about him. I don't remember much about dissecting frogs or whatever in that class, but I remember how he made me feel because he was the first white teacher to put faith in me as a young black kid. And I wasn't the only one. My other black friends felt the same way. So I learned more from him, or as much from him by watching him than I did about biology. And that's the same thing that happens in our classes. So we have to bring this up so that our kids are learning everything they can positively from our teachers, from everyone.
Well, that, and if our students are learning this at a young age, and that means when they're adults, they are going to recognize that and they're not going to continue it. That is the main goal, is to stop it now and teach the next generation to be better than us.
Yes. So thank you, Mr. Medifin, and thank you for everyone who put so much work into all of this. It's very much appreciated. Thank you for the presentation.
Before we wrap up, I actually have some questions. So to be clear, so the 82% participation, that is individuals who participated in either the pre-survey or the post-survey, correct?
The pre-survey or the developmental sprint pre-survey or the developmental sprint post-survey or the post-survey for everyone.
Okay, so then there was and the reason why I'm asking is because, so then 57% participated in the pre-survey, in the overall pre-survey, and then 33% participated in the post-survey.
Yes. So there's no double counting. So there's no double counts. So if you filled out, let's say you filled out survey, well, I call it time 4, right? The post-survey for everyone, but you didn't fill out the pre-survey, right? Or you filled out both of them, I guess, you weren't counted twice.
Okay,
Okay, so it's 245 unique individuals
right,
filled out at least one of the surveys.
at least one of the surveys. Do we know how many filled out both of the surveys?
We have, I believe, so that with the pre and the post survey, I believe it was about 60 or so.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking is because that significant difference in who participates in one or the other should have an impact, I would believe, on the data that you collect. In particular, if a significant number of individuals choose not to participate in the post survey, I'm not saying that you get any additional information, except why didn't they choose to participate in the post survey? Is this a normal level of drop off you see between a pre and a post survey?
Yes,
Okay, on just this work or on work in general?
all work in general.
Okay,
I mean, unless I have them in a room, they can't leave until they fill it out, and I'm not getting 100%. But, I mean, that's just the way it is. So, which says even more about these significant findings, because you have a smaller sample size.
uh-huh,
If you have a smaller sample size, you have to find a bigger difference in order to be confident that this is what's happening in the population. So the fact that these numbers are even smaller and it was significant, I'm pretty confident that that's what we're, that's what we could find in future years.
I guess my concern is, number one, I think that the number of folks who have some concerns about it are larger, because I think it's probably a significant number of them chose not to participate in the post survey. And I say that because I received emails and text messages and phone calls from more than 5 people. So that's the reason why I'm like, and I understand this. I need you to understand, this is the resilience work that we're doing is work that I firmly believe we need to do. It's work that we need to do because it's important that we have a level of understanding and cultural sensitivity for our students and in order to create the best positive environment for them to learn. But my concern has been, and this is when I think one of the things, the recommendations was brought up, was intentionality. One of my concerns was, for the most part, most of these sessions weren't planned for. In other words, it wasn't like we laid out, okay, this is what we're going to do from A to Z in this particular program. That was a concern that I had in the very beginning. I had asked if I could see what we were going to be doing from A to Z to be able to know exactly what we're going to be doing. I think as we move on to the next step, that planning all needs to be put in place far ahead of time so that we can look at it, so that we can evaluate it. One of the things I think that was, and anyone who participated probably heard my voice more than once, one of my biggest concerns was it wasn't the concepts as much. Some of the concepts I had issues with, but sometimes it was the way in which these concepts were communicated and could have been done so in such a way that wouldn't have been a stumbling block to someone who was either skeptical but was open. And I think that's in some of those cases, the very people that we need to be reaching, we put a stumbling block in their way by how we presented the material. One of the things that I would consider we do going forward is let's find a skeptic. Let's get a skeptic to be a part of that and say, well, you know, this would be a problem for me. And be able to have that sort of discussion so that we remove those stumbling blocks so that we can have a process that will be inclusive and allow everybody to feel like that everybody will get as much out of it as they possibly can. Anyway, that was just my perception of it. I very much appreciate the work that the folks who did this. I mean, it was really well. And like I said, if 90% of it, I would say, was just phenomenal and over the top. And this, you know, that tweaking that 10%, I think, would be phenomenal. But what I like is while the rest of the world or the rest of the country is getting embroiled in a political debate over these 3 letters that they may or may not agree what it means, we're focused on once again, developing a level of understanding and sensitivity for our students to create a positive environment for them, and understanding their culture, understanding where they come from, and understanding, by the way, their perception of institutions, of people of different ethnicities. Understanding that is what we need to be doing, because when we understand how they see us and they understand how we see them and we see them for who they truly are, that's when we create a positive environment for our kids. So once again, thank you for the data. I apologize for I will get off of my soapbox now, but once again, thank you.
I just want to add, Mr. Deleuze, that so of the 5 naysayers that I said, right, this was negative across the board. And we had some people who started off very positive, and then, you know, I think we could have made a better use of our time and some of the stuff that Margarita brought up. But I did have 3 people who filled out the survey twice. And they were part of these 5, so I could match up demographics across the board. So they seem to have taken the survey 2 times to kind of, I think, I would venture to guess, to bolster those numbers in terms of the negativity, but everything was identical, and that wasn't the case for any other, you know, and any other individuals in there. And so was there negative? There was not we didn't have 100%, we didn't have 98%, we didn't have 95%. And so I could see, yeah, absolutely. We have obviously some tweaking to do. The differentiation for 299 people participating, I think that's going to be one of the challenges. How do we differentiate? I have a hard time differentiating with 30 people in stats course, or to talk about, this is, like I said, I did a master's at UC Berkeley on ethnic identity development. I'm an anthropologist by training as well. And ethnic identity development takes a while. It is a process for sure. And it takes some time. And it is not an easy journey by any means. Yes, Mrs. Devine. Ms. Devine.
So you guys were talking about negativity and stuff with the whole issue, or with all of this. Was the negativity coming from people who were not maybe understanding fully the whole point of opening up and listening to other people's stories? And so they were maybe holding in some of those lifelong things that they've learned without realizing it. So they may have felt shame.
I can talk a little bit about that because of the groups that I participated in or I was able to observe. So I think for some of them it was, why is the focus on ethnic identity and different ethnicities? As a white person, I have also had traumatic experiences. I also grew up poor. Why is my experience not being discussed in the same kind of venue as everyone else's experiences? But again, and the point being is, why isn't my experience kind of being centered as we're having these other conversations? And so I think that's another, that's a whole other conversation that we can so
Different discussion.
That's part of
Okay.
what I heard in terms of the groups that I was an observer in. My my personal experience is not being validated in the same way that other people's experiences are being validated. So I think that's one of the areas. The other one is this idea of I came to Robla to serve these Black and brown kids, and you questioning my ability or my understanding of their experiences is really insulting when I have chosen to come and work here. And so I think that was part of the conversations that I heard as well, is if we didn't care, we wouldn't have chosen to come to work in Robla, and that's not being acknowledged. So I think there's work to be done in unpacking those conversations. But again, the point of it was to expand the conversations instead of, again, centering the experiences that have traditionally been centered when we do these kind of professional development.
I'd just like to make a comment, Mr. Trustee Deluz's, when you bring up the skepticism, and I noticed in the survey here, and I agree, we need to bring out skepticism, but somebody commented about more, bringing the quiet out. And I think the skeptic may be quiet. And time is such a factor. Time is such a factor when you're doing these types. And I'm sorry I didn't participate in but one this year myself. But I'm sorry. I shouldn't have vacuumed or shampooed my carpet today. I keep cramping here. Also, I'm sorry, looking inward, which I try to do, and I pride myself that I do that, but I keep finding things on my own. So it's not just conveying what we want to see in others. At the same time, we have to see, question ourselves at the same time. And that's I think, an open skepticism. We can find skepticisms in others, but our own skepticisms too. And I do think that's a valuable point, and we really do need to address that. And I speaking of time, I'm just adding on to it here, but time is so valuable in these discussions. Somebody mentioned about slamming on the brakes at 50 miles an hour. That means you're engaged and you want to go on. And I think that was the most positive comment I saw in this whole survey, was that comment right there, which says, they want to do more. So again, thank you for all you've done. I'm gonna shout and stuff at that, and hope I don't cramp again.
Thank you so much.
If I could just say a few words as our presenters sit down. First of all, thank you. I again want to underscore the level of commitment that we received from, technically they're consultants, and it feels like there's so much more than that. So I just want to express again my gratitude for that. I guess I want to say to the board, this is information that we are taking very seriously. The whole point of moving forward with an evaluation was so that none of us were going by our own perceptions or our own experiences or our own conversations with people, right? We wanted to have a much more global and a little less personal, to be honest with you, by having consultants from the outside kind of look at this. So all of that being said, we are going to be examining this data very closely as we talk about what the next steps are for resilience. So I will say that initially my plan was to have a resilience session when we do all of our trainings on the 19th and the 20th. And we will be doing something kind of connected to resilience, in that it will be focused more on the self-care and the social emotional learning. And we'll be working with our resilience consultants to kind of put that together. But it'll be a much kind of smaller touch upon the subject, because we want to take the time to look at this data closely and make sure that we are considering this feedback before we make any strong considerations about exactly how we'll be moving forward. So I want to assure the board that this data will inform the next steps.
Trustee Devine?
Craig, I figured out the best way to explain the questions you're asking. It seems like it's weighted, so people who don't have interaction with children or that situation don't have as much input in the results. So the less interaction you have, say with kids, the less say you have in the data points, because that opinion isn't as important as, say, coming from the teachers in the classroom. That's what it seems like to me, correct?
You're talking about the usefulness question.
Yes, the usefulness question, how it was like, this doesn't apply to me, this somewhat applies to me. This doesn't apply to me, but I understand it. It seems like it's more weighted, so that way people who have had the opportunity to implement it can give a fuller answer, and those who can't really implement it at work, because it's not in their position, don't have as much of a say to numbers or results.
Yes, I mean, you know.
Best way to put it?
Yes, part of our story, our history, my sister and I, we worked as school janitors at our high school, right? And as school janitors, would it have been useful for us to have that information? Not really. We cleaned the school at the end of the day and nobody else was there. As student council representatives,
But
which
this
we
is
were
the new
both,
version?
then it would have been useful in that context, so you're absolutely right. And also, in terms of the likelihood that the 55 people who did not, 54 people who did not respond, that they would all be negative, I mean, that's highly, highly unlikely. And the reason why we would take a sample, you know, that is representative of the population, you know, it gives us a really good chance to see what's going on. That's, I mean, that's the purpose of the sample. But the likelihood that the 55 who didn't respond would all be negative is minuscule. I mean, it'll be reflective of the 82%.
Unless, of course, they decided that they didn't believe in the process anymore and just checked out of it. I'm just saying, I don't know, because all I'm saying is that for some, there's absolutely, there's always a reason why someone doesn't participate. Either they didn't see the email, they didn't bother to do the email, or in some cases, there's a percentage that decided, yeah, no, I don't believe in this process. I'm just saying that it's not something that should be ignored, at least in my opinion. You're the expert, I'm not. I'm just that, to me, it says something. Like I said, especially when I know that responses that I've gotten from individuals have far exceeded 5.
Right. Well, and again, this is a very, very comprehensive survey. My sister received a phone call right before we came over here to fill out a survey that was going to be more than 5 minutes. She said, I can't give you more than 5 minutes. Can you call me back tomorrow? The likelihood it's a robocall, they're not going to call back again. So it's just very unlikely that, you know, is it possible you received more than 5? Absolutely. The naysayers of the 5 that I present, I call them the naysayers, they were across the board negative from the beginning all the way to the end. And so we have some people, learning is not easy by any means for anyone. And I can tell you my own development in terms of my ethnic identity was a painful one, for sure, because of the type of schools that I went to, because of the teachers that I interacted with. And it was a journey that I was on for many, many years, and it took me a long time to get there. And so for some people, you know, just opening this up right now, you know, I have to give them credit for continuing to be engaged. But as a methodologist, I'm very confident that of the remaining 45 who didn't respond, 54 who didn't respond, the likelihood that even if you had half of them, you know, I think it's very, very unlikely, just from a methodological standpoint.
Well, now keep in mind, though, that you had 43% that didn't participate in the first survey. So I guess what I'm saying is that anyway, I just, from what I'm saying is I still believe it is greater than stated, but I don't think that it's something that can't be overcome.
Thank you.
Well, to push back a little bit, and I don't want to try to create controversy, but this is the mechanism that we're using, and this is how we measure it. If someone chooses not to participate in that, there's not much we can really do with that.
Nope, you are 100% correct. But the challenge for me is many of those people who choose not to participate are some of the many of them, and I believe a significant number of them are some of the key people that we need to be reaching, and we need to try to find a way to reach them and get them to be involved. Anyway, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to Guide to Opening Schools 2.
So, thank you. We have developed a document, we're going to pull it up on the screen?
I emailed it to Adam.
Okay, there it is. And just like that. Thank you, Adam. This document is our version for the 2021 school year for opening schools. I will just remind everyone something that we probably worked to forget, which was that our guide for opening schools in 2020 was 133 pages. This document is much shorter, and it because we're opening schools and they're going to look very much like they looked prior to the pandemic, because the authorities and the health officials and scientists are telling us that indeed that is what we are able to do. I'm not going to walk us through this manual page by page, but we do want to have this be something that we do publish for the community if the board were to approve this tonight. And what I wanted to point out tonight were just some things that changed very recently. So as recommendations from health officials change, we see this as a document that will change with them, and we keep our families notified about those changes and how it will work. So generally speaking, the pages around procedures are really talking about masking, and that is indeed one of the changes that we are recommending tonight be included in the manual, because most recently, the most recent recommendation from public health is that while we initially believed that we could take our masks off outdoors, it is now being recommended that masks be worn outdoors as well by both staff and students. And as much as that saddens us to think that we were hoping to have a time of day where we could take the masks off, we do want to convey to our families that we are going the safest route possible. And so the recommendation in my conversation with administrators today was that we err on the side of caution and recommend that masks be worn indoors and outdoors. So that is one of the changes reflected in the document tonight. We are also making a change that we are suggesting that teachers create a seating chart for where students sit. So should contact tracing be necessary, we would be able to say, okay, this is little Jose, and Jose tested positive. Well, who sits next to Jose? And we can look at a seating chart and be able to reveal that. And we would encourage that. I don't think it's possible to do it all the time, but we would encourage that to happen in all settings. So if they go with a specialist, it would be there as well. On the bus, in the cafeteria, we would just monitor and have charts for where students would sit. Another change is related to field trips. We are, even though field trips are being recommended that they not be allowed, we are recommending that field trips go forth and that we consider them one by one as to whether or not we feel that the situation would be safe. So for example, one of the field trips that we have already scheduled for early in the year is a field trip for, I think it's second grade, to a farm. And we think that that's probably going to be a safe field trip because they would be out, they would still wear their masks because that's required, but they would be outdoors. And we don't feel that that would endanger the students in any way. So we have given some, in the document, we've given principals some criteria to consider for field trips, and they would need to approve every field trip based upon the safety guidelines and either allow it or not allow it. And then we are also recommending that we not do assemblies to start the year. We not do indoor assemblies, so that we consider only outside assemblies, at least to start the year. And we would change that based upon recommendations from county health and COVID numbers in the Sacramento area. So those are really, other than that, the document goes on to describe our independent study program, which is an option for families. We do still have to talk to our Teachers Association about the specifics of what the program will look like, but we do have to have a program, and we are moving towards that. And then the rest of the document, actually starting on page 13 and going through page 31, are pages that the board has already approved from our expanded learning plan. And we are just sharing with parents in this document all of the things that we put in place to help support our students as they return to school. So the procedural pages are a pretty small portion of the document overall. So happy to answer questions or clarify or feedback from the board on our Guide to Opening Schools, Volume 2.
Questions? I'll just say that I appreciate all the work that you've done here. I think you've done the best to create a confidence of both the board and hopefully of our staff and most importantly, parents and community for the environment that our children are going to be returning to. I also recognize and I appreciate that you're following all of the guidance that's been provided from both Sacramento County, from the state, and from the federal government. I wish that guidance had been accompanied by information, data, and studies that supported their recommendations so that we as board members can speak with confidence when parents or community members or staff members ask us, well, why are we doing this or why are we doing that? It's always helpful to say, it would be much easier to say, well, according to this information here, it supports us doing this as opposed to, well, these are the recommendations or the mandates that are coming to us from XYZ. I think that's probably one of the biggest failures in terms of doing a lot of this is just that lack of information and data available to the public. But once again, I appreciate that, I think that this plan creates the best environment for our kids to be able to feel safe and be safe when they return to school. So thank you very much for all the hard work that you and staff put together on making this happen.
Thank you for that. I just would want to say that this is on the agenda twice tonight.
Yes.
So we're introducing the document here, but we do think it's important to have the board approve the document, and that's being recommended later. We feel that will show our community that the board also has confidence in the plan. And with the board's approval, should we get that tonight, we then would work very hard to get it out to the community so that everybody has all of this information.
I very much agree. Okay, with that, we'll be moving on to the approval of the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Approved? Opposed? Extensions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, action items. Item A, waive first reading, approve revised board policy and administrative regulation 6158 independent study.
So as the board is aware, we generally, when we make recommendations to board policy changes, we give the policy to the board 1 month, give them a chance to peruse it and ask questions about it, and it comes for approval the second month. We are asking the board to waive the first reading because it is required that we move quickly to adopt a board policy to have an independent study program as is now required by the state. So the language in this policy is language that was sent to us, kind of boilerplate. And so it's the standard language now required by law to have an independent study program. And that's why we're recommending that we move quickly and approve this tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or debate?
I just have a comment to make, and thank you. Yeah, I read the word waiver, so I went through reading the highlights mostly. But this is just for the 21-22 school year, correct?
That is
In
correct.
the document, it says a required annual review. So, it's just a comment, I'm not.
If that's in there, the lawyers said it needed to be in there.
Any other debate or discussion? Hearing no, move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item B, approved guide to reopening schools 2 for August 2021.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or debate? Hearing no, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item C, approve MOU with Be Glad LLC to provide GLAD training to Robla school staff.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there anything you'd like to share on this?
I would just want to point out on this, that this is, we are doing something after the fact, which is not generally how we do things here in Robla, because we do wait for board approval before we take action. However, there was a short timeline, and we did need to move forward during a short window to get this training set up for teachers. And it's actually teachers at 3 of our schools. And GLAD training is something that has been happening in the Robla School District, and we've been very pleased with the results of that training for teachers. This is a program that is now growing to Robla School. We hadn't trained Robla staff before, and that this is actually a direction that Mr. Caff has set at Robla School. So I just wanted to beg the board's indulgence around kind of doing this a little bit backwards, but the circumstances were such that we did need to kind of take care of it in this way. So that's why that recommendation is there.
Well, Superintendent Reyes, I will say you've done a phenomenal job of making sure that we've had an opportunity to review stuff prior. And so this indulgence is well earned and deserved.
Thank you. I won't make it a habit.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or debate? Hearing none, move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item D, approve Sacramento Consortium Teacher Instruction MOU for 2021-2022.
So move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is any,
This is an annual contract with the Sacramento County Office of Education for the induction process, which is a required step for all of our new teachers. Once they get their preliminary credential, they must then go through the induction process, now under the very capable hands of Mr. Penman. And so we do need to have this MOU to access those services through SCOE.
excellent. Any further discussion or debate? Hearing none, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item E, addition of a 2.0 FTE professional learning support teacher positions beginning with the 2021-2022 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any,
Just item E and item F, just to talk about them both at the same time. These are both actions that were part of the plan that the board approved, and so this is just the next process, right? You've approved the plan, and now we have to create the positions, and the board has to approve them so that we can move forward and fill them.
Remind me what schools this was for?
So the professional learning support teachers, we currently have a program where there were 3 positions, and now we're moving it to 5 because we're going to place one at every school. So now all schools will be impacted. Well, all schools have always been impacted, but this will allow them to each be housed at an individual school. And then the peer facilitator is also for all schools.
okay.
I move that we pass item E and F together.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. So the first vote is to amend the motion to include E and F, E and F. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Now move on to the main item, to approve items E and F. Is there any additional debate or discussion?
I'm just happy to see we're gonna have one at each school now, because it is
Yes.
ready.
Okay, seeing no further debate or discussion, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item G, approve retirement incentive for 2021-2022.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Would you like to share on this?
We do these on occasion when we feel that this will be a benefit to the district. This one is actually a smaller group of employees, but we think it's important nonetheless.
Any further discussion or debate? Hearing none, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item H, approve 2021-2022 services agreement with Swing Education for substitute teachers.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Would you like to?
Yeah, this is the company we use to help us find substitute teachers. I think the board will recall that this has been, for a long time, was an issue for us finding substitute teachers, and I'm going to take full credit for finding Swing because it seems to have saved us a great deal. It didn't, the pandemic threw us off, but this is a service that has been really, really helpful to us. So we highly recommend that the board approve this.
Excellent. Is there any further discussion or debate?
I just have a question. Do you think we can, is it possible to have 5 swing votes?
And I actually do have a quick question about substitutes. Are we going to require them to do COVID testing?
Absolutely. Yes, anybody who's in our schools, and swings contract includes making sure that their people are safe before they come to our schools.
Okay.
And I'll just say, I think the board should take full credit for approving it the first time.
Okay. Any further discussion, debate, or jokes? Hearing none, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item I, Robla Building A project contractor contract. Well, that was easy for me to say. Value change number 2.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to this?
Actually, Mr. Castillo probably could speak to this a little bit better than me. This is just a change for the building in which we sit now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this change is, we brought this information before, but we want to be very transparent. This is, on the building, there's a fence. We want to build a metal fence. And so that's to be more to what this area. So this is what the change is. It's still some savings. We're going to used to move the cell tower. We didn't move that. That was going to cost us over $70,000. We decided this would be a better for safety and just better area. That's what this is.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah.
There's going to be a fence for the entire perimeter of the school district office as well as Robla,
No,
or
yes,
just the school?
There's like a wire fence.
Oh, okay.
You see the wire fence that is covered the cell tower and so on.
Okay.
That's what is being replaced.
We really had a problem with the ugly chain link fence in front of our beautiful new building. That's really what this comes down to.
Appeal, huh?
Okay. Any further discussion or debate?
Do we still receive a stipend for that? We do? For the
Yes,
cell tower?
we're getting paid for the cell tower. That's very long lease, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And we
I'm
rec-
glad to see that because I noticed that ugliness out there in front of the next building. Thank you.
And we receive excellent cell service. Okay, seeing no further
That's not
discussion.
true.
What'd you say?
I said that's not true. But anyway.
Well, it's
But we do get
a
the
T-Mobile
stipend.
tower,
But
right?
We do get the stipend.
Okay. Moving right along. Okay, seeing no further discussion or debate, we'll move on to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, moving on. Item J, approval of prime contract change order number 5 to the construction services agreement with Flint Builders for adjustment of costs for the Bell Avenue Elementary School new classroom and administration building.
May I ask if it'd be appropriate to move to items K, L, and M all at once?
They're two separate contracts, so, I
Okay,
think,
so I'll just move on.
so unfortunately, the way it's ordered is J and L are one contract and K is a separate contract. I can talk about Bell.
I'll move for item J.
Okay.
The second.
Get moved and seconded.
So item J is a change order amount of about $65,000 as relates to the Bell Avenue Elementary new classroom administration building. The primary cause of this change is a change of specification from the district. This is the environmental controls. It allows us to have a centralized system to control the environments, the HVAC and so forth at each of the sites. This is a change of specification that occurred district-wide after we had designed Robla and after we designed Bell. So we've gone back, it's necessitated some changes to the actual equipment as well as some of the corresponding ventilation. So that's the primary cost here. It's about $62,000. Other items on this one that I think are worth pointing out to the board, just so that you have a running tally in your head. There's about $12,000 associated with SMUD requesting for an additional utility box on our site. So even though SMUD had an opportunity to comment on the design and the plans, once we got into the field and the inspector came out, he wanted to add another box. And unfortunately with SMUD, we had to do what SMUD says, and that accounted for another $12,000. There was a report of a suspected gas leak on the site. We had an individual come out and identify where that was. That's another $5,000. We had to repair a broken water line that was done during construction, but also separate and adjacent to it was a deteriorating electrical conduit. So one of the things that we've been doing at these sites as we've done these projects is going back and saying, okay, while we're digging this hole, what else is that we have to address? You'll see it lower on, you having to deal with some of the well, how can I put it? The legacy utilities, if you will. The good news is that
That's a nice way to say it.
the good news is that in the course of all this as well is we've also been able to recover about $45,000 in credits. So, you know, while we have a large number in here, it nets out to $65,000. We've also gotten credits for some low voltage work that actually is owner furnished and contractor installed, pulled out of that. We've also gotten some other work that's also come out from either design clarifications or so forth. So we've been able to balance some of it out. It's not been all increased costs, but we are running into issues on these sites just because of the nature of which they were built over time and in different phases of things. Tonight we're asking for an approval of this change order number 5. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
So by legacy utilities, you mean old?
Yes.
Yeah, it's unfortunately being in a community that is as seasoned as Robla is. See, I have my euphemisms too. Historical. There you go. That unfortunately, I guess we kind of figured that this was probably going to be something. It doesn't surprise me one bit.
You said J and L were the same contract, and K and M were same contract? Or did I read that correctly?
So K and M are on the same contract. We've removed M, and I'll explain. I can explain why that is when I talk about K. But L is a separate line item that I think it's easiest for folks just to go one by one because just the nature of these changes. And I think it's important for the public to understand where these numbers are coming from, as well as the board, because some of them are large.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion or debate? Is already a motion on the floor? Okay, good. Okay, so any other discussion or debate? Hearing none, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item K, approval of prime contract change order number 1 to construction services agreement with Clark Sullivan Construction for adjustment of costs for the Robla Elementary School new classroom building and school modernization.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
So this relates to the rural elementary school building that is currently under construction adjacent to us. Here, I'd like to point out to the board, once again, the majority of costs is related to not necessarily a district change, but to the city of Sacramento. They have requested that we maintain crosswalks A at the light and then B on our side of the driveway of Rose Ave. So we're actually having to deal with 2 crosswalks instead of 1 crosswalk. Now the crosswalk at Rose and Marysville will be, have a signal in terms of being able to, or have at least a crosswalk. I'm not quite sure that's going to have a signal yet. However, the other crosswalk that's about 50 feet down where the current speed bump is at, requesting we put a crosswalk there as well. And not only do they want us to have a crosswalk, but they want it to be raised. And not only do they want it raised, they want to have flashing lights. And not only are we not allowed to have solar-only flashing lights, we have to have hardwired electrical lights for the said flashing lights. So ultimately, it provides a safe crosswalk, and it's actually a crosswalk that CDE had also requested us to do, and we had that originally in the plans. We did not have it to this extent in terms of flashing lights, raised surface, and so forth. So this was a change that was in the field that Sacramento has requested. We are to oblige per the city. I know that it sounds like we're a bit of a public improvement process right now, but that is what it is. That accounts for about $85,000 of this change order.
Wow.
And so that's the asphalt, that is the surveying, that is all of the engineering.
Where was this
electric-
again?
So if you go outside about 50 feet where that first speed
You
bump's
mean
at.
like a raised one that goes up and over the street like they have over the freeways?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
It's
I
just-
was like, what?
No.
Think of like a flat little,
Gotcha. Okay.
no, speed bump.
I
Uh-huh.
was like, the city wants
Yeah.
us to build what?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry
Oh,
about
there's no sky bridge.
that. I was like,
It sounds like there should be for that amount.
the way you were
For
describing
that
it
amount,
sounded
that, yeah.
The other items just to for the board's information. So we've added lighting to the covered canopies for the drop-off zones, so that in the evenings, obviously in the winter and so forth, until dark in the morning, in the evenings, that we have a lighted protected area for students to wait for pickup or to be dropped off at. There's some other minor changes. We hit another unforeseen tank underneath the portable buildings over here behind the permanent classroom. So once we excavated and demolished the portable buildings, we found yet another septic tank. So that's in here as well. So I think we've hit all the tanks. At least I hope so.
Cross your fingers.
No thanks.
No thanks.
And then the other two items are related to the reconfiguration of the existing admin. We had some additional abatement we had to do and some reconfiguration of the space in order to make it function better and make sure that we had a restroom for our cafeteria staff.
Any other questions, discussions, debate?
No.
Hearing none, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. I'm just going to put the additional joking and laughing on the increased carbon dioxide intake. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Laughing gas.
Okay, item L. Okay, item L, approval of prime change order number 6 to the construction services agreement with Flint Builders for adjustment of costs for the Bell Avenue Elementary School new classroom and administration building.
I'll move.
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded?
So this item is separate from because of a temporal issue. So it's these things occur at different times, but we came back to the board with these. The first two items are related to the parking lot expansion. One of the things, once again, we have to thank the city of Sacramento, is that even though they had a chance to review the plans, once they were on the field and in the site, they discovered the fire lane as proposed was too close to the structures. And so they've asked us to expand the fire lane in order to create enough distance between the fire lane and the buildings, even though it went through DSA, got reviewed by the city. Once again, this was a field change. This goes back to Trustee Barnes's question earlier about when you have to add additional scope, you're paying for more material, and then B, you're also paying for any increase in the cost of those materials. So that's the first item, about $62,000. The other item below that, it's about $52,000, is when we demolished the blacktop north of the parking lot, we found that the soil was incompatible structurally for the parking surface we were going to put down. It was too moist. It was not going to lend itself to compaction without liquefaction. And so we actually had to remove some of that soil. We had to import some, and then we had to aerate it, which means dry it out. So that additional work was another $52,000 worth of work that we had to go do over there as well. Another $13,000 was related to a revised restroom layout. This is for our permanent restrooms in our existing classroom wings. When we did the demolition, once again, because of the historic nature of the buildings, we discovered that some of the things, the locations of the walls that were assumed were not actually representative of reality. So we've had to reconfigure those restrooms in order to efficiently put down the necessary stalls and other type of equipment in there, and that requires some additional dollars to go do that. And then lastly, going back to the aged utilities, we had to go back and replace the main sewer connection to the school, which is constructed originally of clay pipe. There was a number of intrusions that were identified when we scoped it out. And so we've gone back and we have replaced the main sewer connection back into the city with a compatible lateral going forward. So that was another $64,000. So a lot of this stuff is while we're at it, but some of it is also necessary. I know at all of our school sites, we've had historical issues with water pressure. We've had historical issues with sewer. And so some of these things are just investments in those buildings as we go forward. It would be a shame to have a beautiful brand new building and we're backing up or leaching someplace else. So with that, the total amount was an additional $191,867 that we're asking the board to approve this evening for those improvements.
What was the amount again?
191,876.
So, on the city in the fire lane, you said when they came out, they realized it had to be moved. Would they have been able to come out before and,
They have every opportunity to visit at their discretion on those sites. One of the challenges we've had throughout the last 15 months in terms of construction is getting flesh and blood people on site. And so whether it be scheduling, whether it be, so there's been a lot more review by local agencies, by state agencies and so forth remotely. There's been a lot less in-person site visits over the last 15 months. And we're starting to see the consequences of that in some of these construction projects that are going forward. So the good news is that we're starting to see people more often. They're starting to engage a little better. And I think, when it comes to the city of Sacramento, we don't necessarily have the leverage to say, hey, I need so-and-so out here tomorrow based on what they're doing. So it's unfortunate that it's coming up while we're in the course of construction. It's not uncommon for that to occur. So for instance, when we're doing the Robla parking lot earlier last week, it's the first time I've seen a city of Sacramento car parked out front with someone actually observing the work. And so it's just one of those things where part of it's circumstance, part of it's bureaucracy, and then part of it is just, oh, this is important today.
part of it's because nobody's coffee shop closed down too, right?
So next time you find something in the ground, we only want to hear that it was treasure.
Absolutely,
Okay.
well, we have to be very careful about that because
But
we
they
do not
go.
want to
Good
find,
treasure.
we don't want to
But
find
they go.
cultural artifacts.
Right, not that kind of
Yeah,
treasure.
Gold,
Gold.
Just gold.
just gold.
But they
Just
go.
gold. That's all we want.
Proceeds from a bank heist? No, not so much. Okay. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, we'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. I know you had removed M. Did you want to discuss it at all? Just kind of share with us what it was?
I just wanted to inform the board, there is an item that we've discussed previously regarding the replacement of the remaining blacktop at Robla Elementary. We have gone through a process to identify that cost. Late this afternoon, we were notified that that particular cost could be covered from the URSA funds. And so with that knowledge in hand, what we want to do is making sure that we are complying with the guidelines and regulations of that program and the way that we track it, that particular project. And so with that, I've talked with Mr. Castillo. We're going to go back and just make sure that we're checking all the boxes so that we stay eligible for that, so we utilize that funding to do those improvements. And so we anticipate coming back to you at a future board meeting with that item as well.
Excellent.
But it would delay the timeline.
Right.
It would not delay the timeline for getting that done.
It would not. So the work is currently scheduled probably towards the end of September. Once again, it would be a very similar process where we would put a temporary blacktop down so that we would not have any mud during construction. And then we would come back and seal it and stripe it towards the end of construction in terms of looking at the playground as a whole. And that's a process we have to go through as well with the district staff and the site, is determining what it is that we want to go stripe on those particular this resurfaced blacktop area.
Thank you. Okay, move on to board member requests for future agenda items or reports. Trustee Devine?
No requests at this time.
Trustee Cardona?
Request.
Trustee Barnes?
I was just wondering about this fire lane with this city. and I know it wouldn't save us any money, but, to me, there's a lot of construction going on in Sacramento, and we may be taking a secondary. I'm just wondering about sending a letter to the city council or Mr. Lilly, or a council member, saying that, we're an integral part of the city, being a school district, and that we ought to have some sort of priority, just so we're able to, predict our budgets a little bit better.
I agree.
I would tend to agree. All right. Okay, and I have nothing to request. Before I adjourn, just want to say it was great seeing everybody, even though, we kind of saw you from here up. But it was great seeing everybody. It's nice to see things moving forward and getting closer to normal. Thank you, everyone who tuned in and watched. Please consider, coming down and joining us one day live at the board meeting. With that, this meeting is adjourned.